Welcome to my channel. I am your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today is a little bit of a different video, and that is because I need to disclose the fact and also wanted to tell a little bit of the story behind my being hired by High Matter Books, aka Christopher Ruocchio's company, the author of Sun Eater. This is I guess this is an occurrence that has been kind of waiting for a long time. I've been basically waiting to make and post this video for 2 or 3 months at this point. We thought that I was going to be starting working for them in like January or maybe February at the latest, but a lot of technical complications came up. Not really much of anything that we could help in any serious degree caused for a lot of that to be delayed, and I ultimately didn't end up actually starting working properly until April. In fact, at the time of this video's posting, it is basically this week is when I'll be like actually on officially rather than on freelancer basis. So that is like the entire thesis of this video, is to tell you guys, hey, I work for Christopher Ruocchio now, not just to pat myself on the back or anything, but to disclose the fact that I am now inherently and intrinsically biased in a way that I can't not address without feeling guilty about it, or without it, you know, seeming like I'm trying to hide something, or, you know, something along those lines, I guess. So for those of you who followed me a while, this is something that's not inherently new. I have been doing some manner of freelance work for Christopher for a few years now, but I am now officially being hired by High Matter Books properly, rather than just doing things independently. So that is what this video is disclosing. So for the purposes of today's video, there are 3 different topics that I feel like I basically need to get into for the purposes of what you guys need to know. The first one of those is how I plan to be covering Christopher's work in the future, and you know, basically what this means for my channel with regards to Sun Eater and anything else that he works on in the future, stuff that he's working on right now. For example, that'll be the first topic of discussion. The next topic of discussion will be basically just giving a brief like history, so to speak, of like how this came to be, how I came to be hired by High Matter Books, and then following that up with a little bit of what my job basically looks like, what my job entails for the company. So as I mentioned briefly, it is nothing new. It is nothing inherently new anyway, that I have been working for Christopher Ruocchio for a few years at this point on a freelancer basis, just a couple of different projects here and there. And I have disclosed that in any videos where it has been relevant. If I've reviewed anything Sun Eater related, basically any point over the last like almost 3 years at this point, everywhere from my Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 3 review up to present, I'm pretty sure every video that I've reviewed something that Christopher has written, I've disclosed at some point in that video, usually at the beginning. I'm pretty sure at the beginning in every case, but I've tried to disclose the fact that, hey, I have worked for Ruocchio on projects in the past, or in some cases, like Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 3 or Volume 4 in specifics, that I actually copy edited those projects. I've done my due diligence, making sure that people who watch those reviews know that I am not 100% impartial to that work, because I was associated with those projects. That is something that was very important to me, to disclose that fact. Not just to say that I had early access or that I knew Christopher in some degree for those different projects, but that in some of those cases I had even worked on them. Even my review for like The Murdered Sun, for example, was one where I had proofread the Anderida special edition for that. Let's see if I can move my chair so you can see it barely there. Because of proofreading that, even that was one where I disclosed like, hey, I got to proofread / do a little bit of a copy edit pass on this project entire. So, you know, if you don't want to trust my opinion on some of these things with regard to Sun Eater, because I have worked on them, because I've been paid to do work on them, or because I'm friends with Christopher, that's fair, that's valid, I totally understand, and nobody has to inherently trust my opinion on some of these things because of that bias. I like to think and pride myself on the fact that I'm able to separate myself from that work to a degree that I believe is objective and honest, but again, it is not my prerogative to determine for you whether you believe me or not. That is totally fine. I understand that. So what does this mean going into the future? Well, theoretically, none of this actually changes anything. I still am fairly confident in my ability to separate my opinions on Christopher's work from the fact that I work on it, or that I work for him, or that I am friends with him in any of these degrees. I'm able to separate those two things distinctly. The critic aspect versus the works, the professional/friendship aspect, enough that I feel like I'm still able to review Christopher's work, and so the plan moving into the future is that I will occasionally do that. If there is something of Christopher's work to talk about, whether that be news related, if I can do that, or if there's anything to actually review, I will continue to do so. Now, I will continue in those videos to make clear and to announce, obviously disclose the fact it's like, hey, I work for Christopher. If you don't want to believe this video, if you don't want to trust my take on this, I understand. That's fine. I will continue to do that in those videos, and I will also probably link to this video and every one of those future examples so that, you know, it's readily available for them there, and so that I don't have to go on a 15-minute spiel in every single thing of Christopher's that I cover to any degree. So that's just me trying to be forefront and honest in that way, while also still wanting to review Christopher's stuff, because if you're, you know, subscribe to this channel, or if you're a regular viewer of mine, you are in, there's no small chance that you came to be on this channel because of something related to Sun Eater or Christopher Ruocchio. His material is easily the stuff that is like garnered the most attention on my channel. Collectively, Sun Eater stuff, I believe, is the most popular content on my channel. And so I felt like moving forward to just straight up not cover any of Ruocchio's stuff, to like especially like silently decide not to cover any of his stuff. Either one of those options just felt wrong to me. If I were to just silently stop covering his stuff because I work for him and never disclose the fact that I work for him, that would be dishonest of me, so I don't want to do that. But even if I were to post this video disclosing that I now work for him and then just continue to never review any of his stuff again, that just feels weird to me personally, because I still like reviewing all of the stuff that I read. I still like talking about the stuff that I read. I like talking about books. I like doing this kind of thing, so I want to still continue to be able to talk about that stuff. And because there is a part of my audience that is here, you know, due in no small part to Christopher Ruocchio, and to, you know, deprive them of any of my particular, you know, realm of thoughts on his work would also be slightly unfair to them. Just because I get a job with him, to not talk about any of his stuff again would just be weird. So in short, for this section, I am still going to cover Christopher's content in the future, or cover Christopher's work in the future. I want to still be able to do that, and I will still do that. I will just, you know, disclose a little bit more explicitly that I am straight up on his payroll now, more so than just that I have done work for him in the past, but that I straight up work for him. I'll be very clear about that in every future video regarding Ruocchio that I do in the future. But I'm also not willing to just completely stop covering his stuff, and I felt like I needed to make it very clear that I do work for him in this video. That's why this video exists. You know, it would be, like I said, it would be pretty dishonest of me to not say anything about it. So that is the entire point of this video. If that's why you clicked on it, that's all you want to know, cool. That should honestly be everything you need to know. You're free to click off now at this point if you want. That is all fine. I understand. But moving into the next section of this video, I do want to talk a little bit about my history working for Christopher, and basically how I got the job in some form of summary. You know, I'm not going to go into too heavy detail because I don't feel like all of the details matter enough to get into, and because some of them just, there's no NDA here. Like, I'm not being inherently restricted from saying anything by Christopher, but there's some things that I feel like I don't need to say in the first place. But I will give a brief account of basically how this happened, because I know there are going to be some people who will ask. There are some people who have asked, and I have actually answered this question to people both in person, like at the Shadows Upon Time release day gala back in November 2025. As well as, you know, a couple people who I've talked to in the time since then, like when I featured on Samwise's channel. Was that in March when that video came out? I think. But in either case, I have answered this question already, so I'm just going to leave it in this video as well so that I can have a resource to point people to for the slightly longer answer for my own ease and sanity, right? So the way that I came to be in this position is because of how I came to read Sun Eater in the first place. I was in the Discord server for Mike's book reviews for quite a while, and being in that server introduced me to a lot of things, especially in the fantasy space. A lot of the things that I primarily cover now, a lot of my book reading interests, honestly came from that server. And more than that, I met a lot of my best online friends through that server, and we have our own little private server as well that it's primarily where I spend most of my time on Discord at this point, is with those friends. So I have much to thank Mike for his server, but one of the main things that I have to thank for that was the read-alongs that would go on in that server, the member-run read-alongs specifically, so ones that particular people in the Discord would pitch. We'd have, a group of people who would be like, yeah, I'll join for that read along, and then they would, get their own official channels and chats and stuff in the server, and it was a lot of fun. In late 2021 was when I really started reading again. That was also around the time that I joined Mike's server, and it became early 2022 when there was a read-along for Dark Tower by Stephen King that occurred, and I joined on for that for as long as it ran, from January, I believe, through July. And coming to the end of that read-along, I was looking for another similar read-along to do, where I read basically one book a month with a handful of other people to just have fun. What was I going to do after Dark Tower? I didn't really know, but I did know that Sun Eater was going to have a read-along. Somebody had organized one to begin in August, so right after the Dark Tower read-along, and that was going to go through for several months as well, basically up through the release of Ashes of Man at the time. Because again, this was late 2022 that it was going to be, and I was interested in joining the read-along. Had also interacted with Christopher a couple of times in that server, because he was also a member of that server for a long time, because Mike frankly saved the series. If you don't know anything about Sun Eater, Mike basically saved the series during the COVID era after Demon in White released. Like, him reviewing Empire of Silence was no small reason why the series was able to continue at the time it did and in the way it did. So thank you, Mike, for that, of course. But like I was saying, Christopher was part of that server, and there was going to be read-along for it. I had interacted with him, and I had purchased the books up to that point, and I decided to just say, hey, why not join that read-along? But more than that, the original host of the read-along decided that he wasn't going to actually be able to do that, so I decided to take up the mantle of hosting the read-along. So I ended up reading Sun Eater from August 2022 up through February 2023, up through the latest release, which was at the time Ashes of Man, Book 5, in that read-along format, and really, really enjoyed the series. This was before I had any direct association with Christopher outside of a handful of interactions, and him also reading my reactions to the series while I was reading it at the time. So beyond that, I didn't have any direct association with Christopher, and had already decided that Sun Eater was my favorite series after Ashes of Man. So at that point, I wasn't biased yet, or at least not overly biased, not anything more than basically any other fan of the series during those years was. That leads us into the next stage of the story, and really where the work side of things starts to come into play, and that was the Kickstarter for the original special edition of Empire of Silence that occurred in, what was it, late April, early May of 2023 when that was run. And part of that Kickstarter was an included little bonus add-on tier to it that was called Prepare to Die, and the Prepare to Die tier just allowed for anybody who got that add-on to have a cameo character introduced into the series, specifically for the purposes of being killed off by Christopher. It's not an inherently unique gimmick, but it was a fun one, and I decided to purchase that add-on. I got that add-on, and Christopher and I coming into contact because of that, so that we could, discuss what my cameo character would be, and, the possibility of where he would appear, and the fact that he would die, of course. coming into contact because of that was how Christopher and I came into actual association with each other. And we just happened to discuss in that chat, in the aftermath of that chat, about what role my actual cameo character would fulfill, and basically came to, for all intents and purposes, the simplest way to explain this is that we basically came to like an informal agreement that my cameo character would have a slightly bigger role than some of the other cameo characters by my helping with some of the cleanup of the special editions in a, typo and copy edit sense, basically. This was, like, honestly a huge leap for Christopher to trust me on this, because he had necessarily no reason to believe that I would end up being as thorough as I ended up being with regard to some of this material. It was just something we had been talking about, and he was like, sure, let's give it a shot. And so what I did was I ended up rereading Empire of Silence and Howling Dark very shortly after the Kickstarter was run, and giving him notes about things to correct and fix and stuff like that for his special edition for the passes. And he was impressed with how much I caught, and as a result of that, he decided to give me a proper copy edit job to see what like the full thing would end up actually looking like. He offered to let me copy edit Tales 3 as like a full true trial run, not just like me giving notes of some stuff, but like to actually copy edit something just to see what would happen. And he was also very impressed with my copy edit of Volume 3. I still remember the message that I got from him after I turned that in. He was like, wow, this is very thorough. I guess it was much more thorough than any of the other independent copy editing that he had gotten done for the other Tales volumes, or for The Lesser Devil or Queen of Mid-Ashes. And, well, if you've read some of those back in the day, or the original versions of some of those, you would probably believe it. There were some issues, and he was much more impressed with my output, and I basically became his primary, independent copy editor. So all of the stuff that he published himself, further short story and novella stuff, I basically became the primary person to cover that. So for the proofread of Andorita's version of The Dregs of Empire and Other Stories, I did a proofread of that. I did the proofread, obviously, of The Murdered Son. And I did the copy edit for Tales Volume 4 over the course of the rest of that year and the year afterwards. And I also independently volunteered to do recopy edits, basically, for Tales of the Sun Eaters Volume 1 and 2, which were republished with new cover art, and those updated text versions that I worked on are now the official versions that exist on Kindle. And as well as the update for Queen of Mid-Ashes, I did that copy edit as well independently. And I also did an update for The Lesser Devil, even though that volume has not been republished with new cover art yet. I'm hoping that'll happen soon. I should probably talk to Christopher about that, but that also got an update that, even though it has not actually come out yet, I did also some of that. And again, Christopher was pretty happy about the quality of all of those. And if you happened to actually get reprint versions of the first two Andorita collections, The Lesser Devil and Other Stories, plus Queen of Mid-Ashes and Other Stories, I believe the reprint versions of those actually used the updated text that I worked on for those as well. So the output that I've put in for copy editing purposes exists officially in very many different regards at this point. So that was what, the first couple years of working for Christopher basically looked like. But then come mid-2025, that is actually the correct year, and we suddenly have, Andorita Books needing to publish their version, their special edition of Empire of Silence, which is right there on the shelf. And then Christopher trying to get through his actual, the proper copy edit of Howling Dark for his special edition. So between the two of those, I ended up doing the recopy edit for that. For both of those projects, Howling Dark is in production currently as we speak. In fact, at the time of recording this video, we're just finalizing notes to get sent to Andorita so that the Diamond Edition can be sent to print, and then so that the Andorita edition can be actually, worked on and finalized, basically. So, that is happening very much like right now. And then also the Empire of Silence version, that text also appears in the DAW Deluxe version right up there. The updated text that I worked on last year is also in that, for example. So I worked on those 2 projects in 2025, and moving forward, the rest of the special editions, I will also be doing recopy edits of all of that stuff. But you know, that kind of moves us into the next section. What does my job with High Matter Books entail? Well, you know, it's going to be a lot of the stuff that I've been doing for Christopher Freelance already for the last few years, because that's what I've been doing. I have been working for him, and that's my history of what I've done for him and how in the past. And it was in 2025, after working on the Empire of Silence and Howling Dark recopy edits, that eventually Christopher got a hold of me and said that he and Jenna determined that they could afford to hire somebody full-time, and I was the person who they wanted to hire full-time to do various different stuff. Of course, this was going to include editorial stuff like I've been doing, but it was also going to include other logistics stuff like social media and stuff like that, so that Christopher wouldn't have to be doing all the social media himself, so we could just spend time writing, and then also to take a little bit of the workload off of some of the technical back-end stuff that Jenna has to be doing for their company, because there's a lot of that stuff too. So in November of 2025, you know, right around the time of the Shadows Upon Time release day event, was, you know, leading up to that was when Christopher got a hold of me and was like, hey, I would like to offer you a full-time job, and I accepted. Now, of course, like I kind of hinted at the beginning of the video, we were kind of hoping that I was actually going to be able to start working, like, you know, in early January. Basically, January 1st was like the start date that I had said that like I would be available to do that. But unfortunately, hiring somebody full-time, and especially doing so across state lines, is a complicated affair, and there's a lot of technicalities, and also state governments are very slow. Any government is very slow, but, you know, the state government of Wyoming is very slow, and also Wyoming is a paperwork state, so that meant that a lot of things that could optimally have been done electronically just aren't done electronically here. Wyoming is the state that I live in, so there was just a lot of like timing and technicality related stuff that postponed my official hiring. But basically, I'm going to be just continuing to do some of this work. Now, there is a little bit of, it's not a wrinkle per se, because of some of the delays that were happening. There was actually somebody else who was able to hire on to do on a contract basis, basically. So not fully hired with the company, as far as I understand. There was somebody else who actually hired for High Matter Books to do social media related stuff, which admittedly was actually going to be the part of the job that I was looking forward to the least. I hate dealing with social media stuff, and I'm not particularly like good at it. Like, it would take me a lot of practice to be able to do something like that. So what it looks like is I probably am not going to be doing that quite as much, maybe if I need to, but for the most part, what it looks like my job entails with High Matter Books at this point is mostly dealing with production related stuff. In fact, my title with the company is going to be production manager. So what this looks like is doing editorial stuff, like I mentioned, you know, working on copy edits, recopy edits for special editions of Sun Eater moving forward. But this also means working on Christopher's other projects as well. I've already done a little bit of stuff on Adaman. I've done copy edits of all of the Adaman, well, not all of the Adaman stories, but most of the Adaman stories. I've also been able to take a look at some of what Christopher is working on right now with his next project with the Doomsong Saga. And I'm producing, you know, basically internal documents for Christopher, referential like world/lore Bible stuff for both Adaman and Doomsong, and then of course all the editorial stuff that I've mentioned. So for now, that's basically what we're planning for me to specialize into, is that sort of editorial side of things. But of course, being, you know, the first real full-time hire for the company outside of Christopher and Jenna themselves owning the company, that means that I will probably be filling in and doing whatever else needs to be done that I'm capable of doing in the meantime. But we shall say, for the purposes of this video's, like, you know, aging into the future, the plan is basically for me to specialize on the editorial side of things. So, yeah, that is, I think, basically all that I need to talk about. I think that's all I need to mention and to say. That's a little bit of the story of kind of my past working with Ruocchio, getting up to this point, and then, of course, like I said, being hired, and the disclosure, the entire point of this video, disclosing the fact that I work for Christopher. If you are somebody who is incapable of trusting my opinion on anything that Christopher works on in the future because of the fact that I am actually on his payroll now, I don't blame you. I totally understand. I get it. If that's, you know, a deal breaker for you, that's okay. I truly do understand. But if you are somebody who has, you know, appreciated or trusted my takes on his work in the past, I believe that you ought to still be able to enjoy, if not trust, those takes going into the future as well. I have no fear of, like, losing my job because of my honest opinions about his books. In fact, the fact that I'm able to be honest with him, and I have been forefront with him about some of this stuff in the past, is, you know, no small thing as well. So, you know, I just want people to not be, like, worried about that moving forward. I'm also just now realizing a half hour into this recording at the very end of the video that I have my green screen filter on my camera on, which means that there's stuff trying to key out in the background. Oh no. Oh well, it's not the end of the world. I guess I'll just have to deal with that. I'll just put it in editing, little words on the screen up there, I guess. I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize that that was a thing. I guess the last time I recorded was my green screen, and I forgot to turn the filter off. But that is neither here nor there. Thank you for watching this video. This was just an important thing that I needed to get put out there for transparency reasons, for my own conscience, basically. You know, this was nothing that Christopher or Jenna forced me to make, and like I said, there's also no, like, NDA of anything that I'm inherently required to not talk about. I just have kind of used my own judgment to determine what is or isn't allowed to be said. So, yeah, that is going to be the end of this video. Thank you for watching. If you're somebody watching this at some point long into the future after I've already been working for Christopher for a hot minute, hi, hello. Goodbye now, I guess. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me Casey, and I hope to see you guys in the next video, whatever that may be and whatever it is I am covering.